Hello, and welcome to the Spring Training Series with Planted Places. This is a 3-part training series where we're going to teach you how to grow the healthiest leafy greens and herbs in living soil at home in small containers. And this is so you can realize more energy and better health. And we do all of this without you having to have any prior gardening knowledge, spending a lot of time in the garden, having a home with a big yard, and most importantly, with no chemicals that provide miracles. So in this training, it's really a sneak peek behind the scenes of our Planted Places membership. And what we've got 3 parts. And the first part is Get Planted. And that really is about how to learn the basics of growing with living soil. And how do you look at different growing conditions, irrigation, watering, sunlight, climate changes, microclimates, things like that. And then our second part is Get Nourished. And Get Nourished is about seedlings and harvesting and growth patterns of plants, different plants, herbs, and leafy greens. And the best part is it's about learning different recipes for how to get those leafy greens into your diet on a daily basis. And then the last part is Get Grounded. And that really is what the whole membership is about, which is about a healthy, balanced lifestyle. We're going to talk about healthy habits. We're going to talk about how bringing yoga into your life, which is also part of the membership, how that is a key component to learning patience and just enjoying nature and what we're doing when we garden. We've got a special bonus as well. So we're excited to have you here and we hope you enjoy it. Thanks so much. Welcome to day 2. And in day 2, it's all about Get Nourished. And so we're going to talk about seedlings, which really are just baby plants. We're going to talk about what makes a healthy seedling. We're going to get into growth stages. I'm going to talk about harvesting. And then we're going to talk about food and how to make delicious recipes with these yummy leafy greens that you're making and herbs that you're growing. So let's go ahead and get in this. Get started. I really just want to set the stage for how to think about nutrient density in the leafy greens and lettuce that you are eating. So one thing, as I've gotten into this and I've really researched a lot, it is actually very mind-boggling when you learn about what happens with not only the way that we farm traditionally in the US, but also what happens just to get those leafy greens to the grocery store where you buy them. So I love this visual because it really explains to you what is going on. So there are on average about 5 different touch points before it even gets into your home, the produce that's growing out in the field, between the farmers that are actually obviously harvesting that, the transportation to get it to the distribution centers, and then the actual local transportation to get it to the grocery store. And all along the way, you've got people touching your produce and handling that. And that's a concern when you think about the nutrient depletion, what is actually happening in those greens once they are harvested. And this is one of the great reasons why you really want to be growing your own food, is because it is absolutely fresh. It's growing in the soil. You harvest it, and then that same day you're eating it. So there's really no nutrient depletion going away, not to mention you're the only person touching that produce. But this is just some key stats to kind of look at in terms of what's going on just really since COVID, a lot of this from since COVID. But the data point I really want to zero in on here is the middle one, which is nutrient depletion. UC Santa Cruz did a big study a few years ago, and one of the things they looked at was nutrient depletion after harvest, and they looked at after 7 days of harvest. And the reason why they did that is because it's literally on average about 5 days transit from a farm to the distribution center, and it gets to your grocery store, and then it's probably another 3 days in the grocery store before it's actually in your refrigerator. And then who knows how long before you actually consume that once it's in the refrigerator. So you're looking at an average of about a week before you actually are getting those greens in your body. Now, farmers market, that might be condensed by maybe 2-3 days, but this is an issue because this is a kind of depletion in nutrients that you're getting in lettuces and the leafy greens when you're eating. Spinach, this one is actually very, very shocking. So spinach can lose up to 90% of the vitamin C content within 24 hours of harvest. And this was done by a Penn State University study. And this is concerning because everybody looks at spinach and think, oh my God, it's such a nutrient dense I'm being so good. I'm eating my spinach. And what you need to really, especially because it's got great folate and carotenoids are antioxidants. And of course, the concern there is that, are you really getting those nutrients? Because chances are those have been depleted by the time they get to you, or at least a lot of it has been depleted. So keep that in mind as you think about, does growing food make sense for you, and why are we doing this? So it's not only because it's something that makes you feel good and gardening, but it's also, this is the right thing to do for your body. Now let's talk about seedlings. This is another area that I think is important. And kind of, I talk about what are we doing to eliminate pain points and make it easy for people. One is we give you the soil. The other is we take care of that, keeping it alive and living for you by giving you the right kinds of amendments and fertilizers, all organic, that you need throughout the year as you're replenishing. We give you self-irrigating systems with our mobile structure. But another thing we do is we give you healthy seedlings. And we're not giving you seeds. The only time we give you seeds is when you're growing microgreens, because microgreens, not only are they completely healthy, unbelievably healthy, they also grow within about 5 to 7 days. You can go from seed to eating microgreens. So they're very quick. But it's really important for people, I think, to get to harvest quickly and really enjoy that nutrition and get that in their bodies. So that is why we start with the seedling. So let's talk about healthy seedlings. And this is an area where it can be really frustrating for people, because what happens is you might go to the nursery or you might go to your hardware store and they're selling you seedlings, and you don't really know what you're looking for. You just, oh, that looks like lettuce, I'm going to buy some. And you could be buying seedlings that are very distressed, and you may not even know that. Oftentimes when you have a lot of product that's sitting out on the shelf, it is more open for disease. It's not in a protected greenhouse environment. A lot of times it's not being watered consistently, and that is a hard thing for a seedling, because if you look at a seedling, it's living in a very small space. So let me show you an example here. Let me take one out. Here's an example of a seedling, and you can see here there's not a lot of soil going on. This is actually a very healthy seedling. It's perfect. You can see the roots. It's not root bound. It's ready to go into a pot. This is a perfect seedling to send. You can also see here, it's the root, the branches of the leaves are right at the very bottom of the soil there. That's perfect. This is a perfect seedling. And you don't want to see a seedling that is getting tall. Let me see if I have an example of one. The funny thing is that I have very healthy seedlings right now, so I'm kind of, this is a collard, and this one is, again, very healthy. It's got a good root structure. There's starting to be a little bit of a stem here. Now, collards grow that way, so I'm not too worried. But if you see a lettuce, romaine is a good example. If you see that stem at the bottom getting really tall and then the branches of the leaves come out, that plant is already stressed. It's already what we call bolting. It's going to seed already as a young seedling. So can you imagine what it's going to be like that when you put that in your container or your pot? It's not going to be happy. It did not get set up for success. That's what I like to say. Now, also what happens with seedlings as they're growing, the initial seedling leaf that it has, it tends to the energy goes into all the new growth, and it kind of gives up on the original leaves. And that's why that's why it's very common for with a seedling to have a leaf like this that's just it's discolored. And oftentimes I just recommend people take those off, because it's taking energy away from the new growth. Let's talk about, here's some, I'm just gonna lift the whole thing up. This is the packaging that we ship seedlings in the mail, and you can see these are very healthy seedlings. These are all single seedlings. This one is a multi-seeded one, but this is arugula, and these are your leaf lettuces and romaines. These are very happy and healthy. And again, there's no stretching going on. There is, it's not dried out. You don't want that soil to be drying out when it's in the 6-pack at the nursery, because again, that means it's getting stressed. And you also want to be looking for disease. So if you're in there and you're shopping and you're looking for seedlings, look underneath the leaves. We're going to have a whole conversation about pests and disease, so don't worry about that. I'll get into that. But you really want to make sure before you even put a seedling into a pot that it doesn't have any disease on it, that there's no signs. And we'll, like I said, I'll show you pictures, we'll cover that. So let's talk a little bit about seedling growth, the growth stage, sorry. Okay, so now let's talk about the growth stages of the seedlings. I'm going to show you what a plant looks like as it starts to grow in, when it's young, as it starts to grow in, and then when it's bolted. And again, when something bolts, that means it's time to take it out of the pot. It's time to replant it with a new plant. And so I've got some examples here that I want to show you. So let me see here. Okay, I'm going to show you the different phases of a plant's growth, and we're going to take a bok choy. So this is actually a tatsoi, but it's in the same family, and it looks very similar. A bok choy might be a little bit taller leaves, but you start out with this size, okay? And you put that in the pot, and in probably about 2 to 3 weeks, especially now that we're entering into spring, we've got longer days, sunnier days, warmer days, it's going to grow faster. And so this is a bok choy that has been growing. Here we go. I now can harvest this thing, okay? It's been growing. I would say this is probably still sort of growing in, but for the most part, I can start harvesting that. And how I'm gonna harvest it is I'm going to take the leaves around the outside. And how we talk about that is I always call it grazing. We actually graze. When we grow in containers and on our walls, we're grazing. So we're not doing what is probably more typical in a raised bed, where you grow it and you get completely to harvest and you cut the whole thing at one time. We're not doing that. We are just taking 1, 2, 3 leaves at a time from different pots. Remember I mentioned we're growing 33 pots here, so we got plenty to choose from, but we're not taking a lot. And that is very important, because when you are harvesting a plant, remember photosynthesis, and remember that with a plant, the leaves, let me grab this one. These leaves, these are solar panels. Okay, think of them as solar panels. They're out there grabbing the light. So if you go ahead and you pull off and you take away most of the leaves, it's not going to be able to reproduce and regenerate more leaves for you. And so you want to make sure that to harvest longer and more often, you want to just take a few leaves and then go to the next pot, take off 1 or 2 leaves. So it's a little bit at a time. But let me show you this bok choy. So we talked about, here we are, and we are harvesting it. It's growing in, it's harvesting. And typically, you start out with a small seedling, and then you're gonna wait about anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, completely depending on, remember we talked about sun. How much sun do you have? 8 hours of sun, you're looking at getting to harvest much faster. 4 hours of sun, it's gonna take longer. But once you're harvesting, you usually can harvest around 4 weeks, probably about 4 weeks of harvesting, okay? Totally depends, again, your microclimate, what the temperatures are. If the temperatures are very hot, it's summer and it's getting hot a lot, and the plant's kind of getting stressed, you have to be careful that it won't bolt, right? It might bolt quicker. So you want to harvest it, and you might be replenishing it more often because it's growing faster, you're harvesting it faster, and it needs to be replenished. But what I want to show you here is, this is an example of a bok choy that is starting to bolt. Okay, this one has been there a long time, okay? And you can tell because it's got a very thick stalk. Typically, there are some leafy greens that you can grow and they will last for a while. Swiss chard's a good example. This is a Swiss chard right here. And you can actually grow those and harvest them over probably a couple months before you have to take it out. Bok choy is another one where you can kind of push the envelope on that. Part of it is we're coming out of winter, and so bok choy is a plant that you grow in the winter, so it grows slower, and then I've just been harvesting it a long time. But I can tell that it is starting to bolt. If I look in the very middle of the plant, which I'll show you, it looks, you can see there's a little flower in the middle there. It almost looks like a little broccoli floret that's coming out. And that tells me, okay, you know what? This thing is about to go to seed. And so I should just harvest the whole thing and plant a new plant because it's already kind of spent. And another way you can tell is if you taste the leaf. When you see something, you can tell it's starting to bolt, and then you taste the leaf and it just doesn't taste good. Either it's very bitter, or it doesn't really have much taste, or it's really hard, kind of thick texture. that typically means like it's done. It's time to take that plant out, plant a new plant. Okay, here's an example. I like this one. This thing is a full-on flower, right? I left this in here so I could show. I knew the training was coming up. I saw this thing bolting and I just kept it. It's been bolting for a few weeks now. So it just keeps, that stalk just keeps growing up and up and up. So this looked like the other one earlier, but now look what it does. So we're not talking about seeds in this training, but what you can do with this is if you want this thing to go to seed, you can let this go to seed and actually then take a few of the seeds out and plant them as seeds and plant new bok choy. Again, I'm not covering that in this training, but you can do that from these plants if you really want to be doing that. I get asked, if you're growing in containers, is it okay to go ahead and transplant that once it gets too big for the size? Can I go ahead and transplant it into the ground? And we recommend no. You can do that with herbs, absolutely, because what happens with herbs last a very long time. And typically what will happen is with an herb, it just gets so much roots in that pot that it doesn't matter how much fertilizer you're giving it or how much water. For one, you have to water it all the time. And there's just not enough soil for the roots. And so it's going to get stressed big time. And so what I say with those is, go ahead and put them either in a much larger pot or put them in the ground. Certain herbs, mint's a good example of one. It grows by rhizomes, so it kind of spreads like a weed. Oregano is another one like that too. You need to be careful. If you put it in a garden bed, just know it's going to spread like crazy. Lemon balm also can do that. So it's really your choice, but I would recommend putting it in a larger pot or harvest the whole thing and make some great meals with the herbs. But that's kind of what the general cycle is. 1 to 2 weeks to get to harvest in the summer, around 4 weeks of harvesting, and then you're going to replace that. So basically every 4 to 6 weeks, you are replacing seedlings in the summer. In the winter and in the fall, when days start getting shorter, those weeks, as days get shorter, those weeks get longer. So longer to get to harvest in terms of the seedling growing in. That's kind of how to think about it. So next up, we're going to be talking about specifically how do you harvest when your plant has come to the kind of end of its harvesting and you need to do your final harvest. I'm going to give you some tips about that, how to do that the correct way. And what I mean by that is if you do it the right way, you actually can preserve the freshness of the leafy greens in your refrigerator for longer than you might think. Oftentimes when you go to the farmer's market and you buy your fresh, maybe your Swiss chard or your romaine, and you think you're being all good because you're buying from the farmer's market. And then what happens, of course, is 4 or 5 days in, those leafy greens are completely wilted. And you can imagine a lot of that is because it's been handled and, it was picked from the farm, and maybe it was picked and maybe it was sitting around for a couple hours before you were able to get it into your refrigerator. And that's the key component, is once you do this final harvest, you want to make sure that you put it directly into water and you don't over soak it. I'll go into those details. But first, let me just kind of show you, I want to show you a couple more plants that are ready to be harvested. Final harvest. And as I mentioned before, a lot of these plants, arugula, mizuna, spinach, even a lot of those kinds of seedlings, when they start to bolt, you can actually cut them back and continue the harvest longer, and it's okay. It actually will grow right at the growth stem where you cut it. It will grow another shoot, and it works and it goes for a while. But sooner or later, it's going to get exhausted. You're going to tell from the taste, or also just the plant just keeps bolting, and it's time to take it out. With lettuces, once it bolts, it's done. You got to take it out. But let's look at this mustard. Here's a mustard plant. This has been in the wall for a very long time. How do you know this? Because you can tell it's super thick. I don't know if you can see that. Very, very thick stalk. And so I'm going to do a final harvest on this. I also know when I taste the leaves now, they're really strong. I don't mind spicy, so it doesn't bother me. But for most people, this would be a problem. But let me kind of show you what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to cut it. Okay, so I'm going to cut it right here at the stalk, all right? And this is really thick. Oh my God. And one of the things to know about when you do this is a couple things. See this is a little, almost like a needle nose type of tweezers. These are really clippers. These are really good for seedlings and for trimming off plant just leaves when you're harvesting and such. So take a look at that. We actually give these to our members in the membership when they first start. But on this now, what you're going to do is you're going to take this branch and you're going to immediately put this in water. So I usually take a mason jar and I'm going to really place that into water right away. Okay, I don't want to submerge it too much. I just want to make sure that the root part there, the branch, is getting some water. And that's going to preserve it. That's an important part of making sure that it's not going to it will last longer once you get it into the refrigerator. One thing you don't want to do is you don't want to put your leaves and you don't want to put them in the water and soak them in the water for a long time. Usually not more than 10 minutes. After about 10 minutes, if you have your greens soaking in water, that's when the vitamins start leaching out of the leaves. So you don't want that to happen. So this is safer. You're just kind of putting it, the stem right in there. That's safer. The leaves are not touching the water. And then what I'll do, once I'm done harvesting everything, I'll take this inside and I will clean off the greens, cold water. I'll do it in cold water. Just basic salad spinner. Put it in a salad spinner, spin off the excess water, and then what I do is I lay it on paper towels in the individual leaves. I take off individual leaves, I lay those on the paper towels in layers on the paper towel, and then I put that into the refrigerator, into the vegetable compartment in your refrigerator. And you will find that those leaves will last a very long time. The crispness is still good. You still need to worry a little bit about nutrient depletion, but it's nothing compared to what it would have been if you would have bought it at the grocery store or even the farmer's market, because it's coming right off the wall. Literally, it's like a 10-minute thing between it cutting, final harvest, and going into a refrigerator. So that's a good thing. And then the other thing I wanted to show you is I wanted to show you some plants, other herbs, kind of when herbs are ready to come out. This is a cilantro. And you can tell that this is done. It's starting to bolt because do you see the leaf strut? Here you've got a leaf that's just a regular basil leaf, a regular cilantro leaf like this. But now when it starts to look more like that, a little more feathery, that is it, that's bolting. And that means this needs to come out as well. Also too, you notice there's kind of some purple, it's some of the winter greens, when it gets really cold, they will start showing, it's kind of how they show their stress a little bit, and it's just the stress from the cool temperatures, and that's when they get those real kind of pretty purple colors. Sometimes it changes the taste a little bit, makes it a little sweeter. It's really good. So that's a good thing to know. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the fun part of the training, and we're going to go into talking about leafy greens and getting those into your diet. And I'm going to show you some interviews. Featured chef that works with us and does a lot of our online cooking classes for the membership. Her name is Robin Joy. She calls herself the Happy Food Chef, and she's all about creating delicious, nutrient-dense food. And so every month in our membership, we do Get Your Greens Challenge. We use a different category of meals for each month. So January was smoothies, February was soups. This month is all about salad dressings. Next month's going to be tea. We move into May. That's going to be fun cocktails and mocktails with the herbs you're growing. We move into marinades, salads. So it's kind of endless what we can do. Stir fries. It truly is endless. So that's a really fun part of what we do in the membership. And Robin Joy always puts together featured recipes specifically with the types of herbs and leafy greens we're growing, but also based on what that featured special food challenge is that month. Cooking challenge, I should call it. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to show you some of those interviews we had, just some snippets of that, where she really zeroes in on nutrition and what can you do, unique ways to get that nutrition into your everyday meals. Okay, let's get to that. Hi, everybody. I am so excited to be back here with Robin Joy, the Happy Food Chef. Robin is a wonderful part of our Planted Places, Planted membership program. She brings in all sorts of knowledge. Her background is extensive. And I think actually, before we get jumping into some things here, I do want Robin to give a little background about her, because it is pretty amazing all the different things that you get to benefit from that here in the Planted membership. So Robin, do you want to just give a quick background?
Sure. Hi, Christy. It's so good to be back. Yes. So I have been on this journey for, oh my goodness, over 40 years. And I really it really all started because I was overweight and I tried every diet in the book, and I had to figure out, how can I loved food. I loved to eat. How can I make it so that it's what does healthy eating look like? And realized that the only way I could approach it was not from health. I had to approach it from how can I make delicious food and make it taste great. And then the benefit, the side effect is that it's healthy. So I didn't chase the health aspect of it. And actually it was vanity that drove me. So I've been on this path for 40 years. And so, yes, I am a chef. I predominantly am a raw chef, known for my raw food, because some of the best recipes in vegetarian cooking are in the raw world. That doesn't mean that I'm a proponent that people should be raw. It's just that those are where some of the best recipes are. And the great thing is that you can convert so many of the raw recipes to cooked recipes. As a great example is a zucchini lasagna that I make both ways. And sometimes when I have company, I'll actually make it both ways because it's the same thing. I first make it raw. I split it in half. I throw half of it in the oven, and you've got two different versions, and they taste very different. But they're
That's what I was going to ask you. Do you do like taste tests around that? That is so interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
so and someday we'll do that.
Yeah.
And you can have it both ways. So in winter, for sure, I want it cooked. In summer, I like it raw. Same thing with a beautiful pasta sauce. I make it raw for the summer, and I make it cooked for the winter. So there's many things you can do.
I love that. Yeah. That makes me think, of course, of soups and how, like, right now in our planted membership, we are doing that soup challenge. And I think to myself, we could do this in the summer too. And it would just be all your cold soups, right? A lot of your raw soups. And right now, making them. So, yeah. So great. Okay. Well, I have to go back to one thing you said, which is true.
One thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Take those soups and throw them over a bowl of greens. Not a salad, just a bowl of greens. Put that hot soup right on top of it, and the greens, they don't cook, they almost melt into the soup.
And they taste so much better as a result of doing it that way. You taught me that this month, and I've been doing it, and it makes such a difference because most people, they don't realize, you think you got to cook it, and the next thing you know, the greens have completely wilted. There's no taste, there's no texture. It's just this stringy thing in your soup. You know what I mean? So it really solved that problem. Yeah. That's great. Well, and one thing I want to say that I noticed that you mentioned, because I think it's an interesting driver for most people, and a lot of people go, "Oh," but like the word vanity, it is true. Most of us, that is the reality of the world. We are sort of driven by that, and we call it health, we call it whatever we want to call it. But what's really interesting is I just think of my own personal story. And I had a lot of issues kind of with gut health, and you call it IBS and all these things, right? So I got very interested in leafy greens and what that meant. And you would talk to people, and it really wasn't until I started growing food and eating the food I was growing in organic soil and on walls and everything that I noticed the difference, because I would get full faster because the food would fill me up faster. And it was interesting, this whole thing about trying to lose weight, and I'm eating salads, but it's not really working. What's wrong? And it's like, well, to a certain extent, what kind of lettuce or leafy greens going in that salad, right? I don't know if you want to talk to that a bit.
Absolutely. And well, two things.
Yeah.
You can eat a tremendous amount. I mean, people look at what I eat and then they look at me and they're like, where are you putting all that food? So yeah,
Right.
I can consume a lot of food, but only because it's really nutritious and nutrient dense. And yes, in terms of greens, in terms of growing it and buying it at the store, there's no comparison. And I really beg people to even just do their own taste test. Go buy some lettuce that's at not at Whole Foods or not at an organic place. Just go buy some regular lettuce in a big chain supermarket and you taste that lettuce and then you taste the lettuce. Just do a taste test exactly one and one. I would bet any amount of money there's no comparison in the taste, because the minute you pick that green off of the plant, off of the root, that's it. It starts to degrade. And so by the, what you get in the supermarket is not, it's not comparable. It's not comparable.
Yeah.
And not only that, you guys are putting together beautiful soil, so you have the proper bugs in there that we need in our gut. So, it's those are your prebiotics from the greens that are going into your gut, that's going to feed your gut. So there's no comparison whatsoever. So
It's interesting as you learn, yeah, and as you learn about the soil, I mean, we do a lot of that in the membership, but we make it fun, right? And we do the heavy lifting for people. We provide them what they need to add to the soil, but you learn along the way, and you're adding all these micronutrients. They call them trace elements and macronutrients, and they're all kind of needed in the soil because one maybe helps up to the nutrients of another. I mean, there's all this symbiotic relationship going on, and it's interesting because it makes you realize, wow, so the plant is taking all that up. So if I was not growing that food in really rich, dense soil, like it's taking whatever's in that soil, right? So it's kind of like it makes you realize
right,
the importance of that. It's so subtle, but God, is it important? Yeah.
very important, because one of the big complaints, that a lot of your people in the holistic world are saying is that the general food that people are eating, it doesn't have the nutrition. It doesn't have enough nutrition in it because the soil is so depleted of nutrients. So if you're growing it yourself, you at least can control some of that.
Well, and
Absolutely.
I would even say, so I would even add that take arugula. You know, um, we grow arugula a lot because I just love arugula. And I got to tell you, I always liked arugula, but it wasn't until we started growing it in this soil, and I don't even think it was the seedling variety we were using. That might have been a little bit of it because we do curate special seedlings, but I really think it was the way we were growing it in the soil. Because when I go to Whole Foods and I buy the fresh organic arugula and I taste that, compare it to what I'm growing, it is completely different. So it's amazing, even at the organic expensive grocery store. you
Uh,
know,
no,
yeah.
there's no comparison whatsoever. None.
Well, what I
Zero.
want to what I want to talk about is because I've been excited about this because I think this is something that comes a lot for people is they get growing food and they're very excited, and two things happen. Either they're like, "Oh my God, it's so beautiful! I don't want to eat it," because number one is I don't really know what to do with it. That's the big dance what I want to talk about today. but
Right.
at the same time, it's so beautiful that they're like, "Oh, I'm just going to let it keep growing." And what people need to realize is when you grow food, it wants to be harvested. That seedling is really only intended to be around for 8 weeks top. I mean, some of your greens, your bok choys, your kales, they might last a little longer. Sooner or later that taste starts deteriorating, but with the lettuces, they will go, we call it going to seed. It bolts, it starts becoming a flower, and people think
Right.
it's so pretty, and I'm like, that's not pretty. That's pretty, but that means you need to take that out, you need to replenish it. So what I want to talk about are what are really creative ways to really get these leafy greens and lettuce and herbs, grow a lot of herbs into the diet. And we really, I should call this a grazing wall, because really a grazing wall, grazing containers. I mean, the way this works is if you are constantly harvesting your plants, it's very good for the plants because they're regenerating. It's great for the soil. I mean, the
Oh,
on outside, you're pulling out the leaves, and that's really energizing the roots to take up more nutrients. So it's a whole, again, I love to say that word symbiotic because it really is. It's this whole circular ecosystem going on. And so I want to give people a way to, like, how can you continue to harvest continually and really take some of these recipes that might be getting kind of boring. Like I could say that for me, like, oh my gosh, I jazz it up. And what can I be doing with my recipes, or just basic meals that you eat or you feed a family with, and bring those greens in.
right. Well, I think one of the things, a big one, is to do wraps. Wraps
Ah,
are great. So, like your bok choy. So here's you have a nice big bok choy leaf, right? So now shred up some
Hmm.
carrot, chop up some green onions, some red peppers, and then make, if you have some beautiful carrots, make a gorgeous ginger, um, carrot ginger dressing. And then you can put some, and you make the sandwich, you make it into a wrap using that big bok choy leaf. It's so, and your kale leaves, again, too, use these as wraps. I don't know if you guys are growing chard. Your Swiss chard is
Chard,
great.
chard, we're definitely growing chard. Would that be good for a
Yes,
wrap as well?
you
Yeah.
bet. It'd be great. And then the other one is, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a total
Collard
blank. We
greens.
used to
We've done collard.
collards. So here's the other thing. You can make gorgeous with nuts, because the way to get your protein, if you make a beautiful nut paste, and we'll do a class on, I call it a bunny rabbit cheese, because that's what we called it at the restaurant where I work. And it's a gorgeous cashew cheese that
Oh,
tastes
yeah.
really cheesy. And you do this whole thing in the collard green, and it's a gorgeous meal. So, your big leaves can be substituting for a piece of bread.
Tortilla in the case of wrap. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now you said ginger carrot dressing. I have to ask you, Robin. So you said to just make a delicious ginger carrot dressing, and
Yes,
I think,
because that's
how do I do
right.
that?
Yes,
Yeah, is there like a trick to that?
yes, the ginger. So you're going to have sesame oil. You're going to have rice vinegar. You're going to have your green onions in it. So we'll do a recipe with
Okay.
beautiful carrot, some honey in it. We'll do a beautiful ginger carrot dressing, because that's
Love
perfect
that.
with bok choy, and also put in some bean sprouts. It's just makes a great wrap. So
Well, and that's a great thing because we're going to be doing the, right, we're finishing up soup challenge for this month. Next month is teas. And then in April, we're going to be doing salad dressings and vinegars. And so you're going to be excited because
yeah,
it's going to
that's a
be a lot of that.
sandwich
Yep.
with those greens. Is every time you make a sandwich, just make sure you've got tons of greens in it, with tomato and whatever you put on it. It's just, that's a great way to use your greens. And then get into making your pestos, all different pestos you can make with spinach greens, with your cilantro, with your parsley. It's just endless, constant, and you can use different nuts with your greens. Throw it in your quiz. Again, go back to the equipment. That food processor is your best friend for making.
Well, and what I love about what you just said about the pesto is oftentimes everybody thinks about pesto as basil. Like, okay, that's I do that in the summer because that's when I grow it. And what I have really learned from you is, you can make a wonderful one with parsley. And we grow
Oh,
parsley year round, in our
absolutely. And
containers because parsley.
cilantro,
Hmm.
yes, you can make your
Okay,
pesto.
cilantro.
Absolutely. And you can use different nuts. So, you can, all these different nut meats. I mean, if you're making tacos, walnuts, make a gorgeous walnut meat with a little bit of red onion, and then chili, and cumin, with lemon juice. And it tastes just like taco meat. It tastes exactly like.
And so now, Robin, you're teaching me this. And then could you take a big kale leaf or even some lettuce and chop that up and put the meat while you're cooking it? I mean, could you do something like that? Am I getting a little crazy?
Your lettuce you don't want to cook with it, but if
Okay.
you're let's say you're taking a beautiful big leaf of lettuce,
Mhm.
if you have a large leaf, okay, now you're going to make it your taco meat, whether it's made with
Okay.
with meat or with walnuts. And we'll do a class on making walnut meat, because it's so out of this world. You wouldn't even know that you're not eating
Yes.
meat. Okay, you put that
Yeah.
in there with a beautiful salsa, and make your own salsa so that you can use up your cilantro, right? Your cilantro
And
goes right.
tomatoes and pepper. We're going to be growing that this summer.
Yes,
Yes.
and
Okay. Keep
green
going.
onion. If you're growing
Uh,
green onion, or chives, even chive. So you chop all this up,
Mhm.
you make a beautiful salsa. Okay, you wrap that chopped, and you can make it also, it doesn't just have to be with tomatoes. You can make a beautiful red pepper salsa. It's gorgeous.
Mhm.
So many different salsas. You could, in mango season, you make a gorgeous mango salsa. And you use your lettuce leaf as the taco, um, as the shell. But if you want to even use your shell, there's nothing wrong with a beautifully, listen, I make homemade taco shells that are just out of this corn tortillas that are so gorgeous. And little ones, they're mini, and then you put your lettuce leaf right on that, fill it with everything else, and you've got a gorgeous sandwich there. So
We got
there's
to
one.
do a salsa challenge.
Oh yeah.
We
Also,
got to,
you
every
got
time I
a
talk to you, I get so many ideas.
yeah, and a sandwich pizza challenge. Oh my
Oh yeah,
gosh.
and I was gonna say, let's talk about pizza because that's one thing I did want to ask you before we got off here. So far we have talked about wraps, we've talked about pestos, we've talked about sandwiches, we've talked about tacos, all these different ways to throw in your greens and bring in your plant-based food. But then now, I wanted to bring up pizza because I'm talking now to kind of all the moms and dads out there that are dealing with little kids, and I got three. They do not, if it's green, they won't eat it when they're young. It's very hard. It's challenging. It's a rare kid that will go and we'll eat that. And I have three. I had one of them like that. It wasn't until I started growing food that they started being a little interested because I think because it was growing in like what's the. But pizza. When they're young, what do you do as a parent? You go, okay, pizza. The friends are coming over. Let's give them pizza. What can we do to make
Right.
it healthy?
Well, of course,
Yeah.
any of you can do a beautiful crust, do a beautiful whole grain crust, sourdough crust. Then, of course,
Mhm.
there's all people are doing with cauliflower and zucchini crust. So you can make a gorgeous crust, make a gorgeous tomato sauce. And then you can sneak your greens in if you layer them first, then you put your sauces on, and then you can put if you're going to use cheese or whatever other vegetables, your chopped up peppers, everything else goes on top so that your
Uh-huh.
greens are snuck, they're snuck
Smart.
in.
I like it. I like
And then
that.
cheese on top, but you put them as your first layer so the kids don't even see them.
Oh, I love that. So you just gave me another idea. When you're doing a wrap, this is a very famous kind of lunch for kids, right? Is the wrap. And let's say that the bok choy might scare them. You layer that, you get your tortilla, whichever, and then you put the bok choy leaf, right? And then you roll
Absolutely.
everything.
On top
Yeah.
of you sneak it in.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Very
look,
good.
and here's the
Wonderful.
thing. If you don't want the kid like a collard, let's say, or your kale, and you want to get some of that in to the kid in a wrap, then chop it up really small. Don't put the
Mhm.
whole leaf. If you're going to use a regular tortilla for your wrap or any of the wraps that are out there, okay, take it and chop it fine, and that way you can sneak it in with the other stuff, um, and
Right.
that you're not biting into a huge leaf, and that way
Yep.
you'll,
That's actually very good.
yeah, you'll
Yeah.
sneak it in.
Yeah, right when I said that, I realized, oh, that wouldn't get by my child. One of them it would, but the other one it wouldn't get by, but the chopping would.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's really too all depends on, don't make that wrap without having either a really good dressing, or and you can make gorgeous herbed mayos, for the kids. You've got to have something on there. You can't expect them to just sit there and eat a veggie wrap or whatever unless there's some really good stuff in there to make it moist, to give it the flavor. You've got to get into the sauces and dressings and salsas and all of that to put in these things.
Right, right.
You just
Love
do.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Robin. I think, my goodness, we've kind of covered the gamut of the different types of meals that you can be adding your leafy greens to and just getting that nutrition in there. I think that's the important point here, which is to say, when you're growing, especially leafy greens and lettuces, it's not just about the salad, right? It's really about infusing that
Absolutely.
everything that
Yeah.
yeah.
You,
And I
you've
think
learned
that is
how to,
what you
You've got to learn how to make the
Yeah,
dressing
no,
and this
the
and
dressing
all
and
of
the
those.
salsas. Well, and I think what's
Yeah.
interesting and what I have noticed just in the last few months that we've been working together on this is I think about it differently now. When I'm going to approach a meal, I think about differently now. I'm much more adventuresome, which is something that I haven't been before. I was always about what's that recipe, and I'm becoming more adventuresome. And really more than anything, I'm grazing and then I'm infusing the flavor, and I'm finding that my kids, what was it? We did a soup last week, and we were doing a salad challenge, and I that's what it was, and I was doing an interesting dressing, and I put it in front of him, and he was, you know what he said? He said, "Wow," he said, "this is really alive." He used the words alive. He goes,
Yeah,
"I
that's
really like it." He goes, "Isn't that crazy that he said that?"
right. Right. And
Yeah.
that's what it's called, living food. It is. When you grow your own food, it's actually called living food.
Yep.
There's
Yep.
actually
And we're growing it and
an
living.
there's a I believe there's a raw institute, culinary institute, and it's called I think it's in California, actually, in Northern California. It's called the Living Foods Culinary
The
Institute.
living food.
So it's living food, and that's
Ah,
what, especially your microgreens, are totally considered living food. Yeah, and those micro
and we grow the
microgreens, for your kids, throw if you don't want to, if you're making a sandwich for a kid, don't throw in the lettuce leaves. Throw in your microgreens. They're so delicate, they'll barely even notice that they're in there.
and they talk about
They're
packing
just
in the
delicate.
nutrition.
Yeah, and they're just so
Yeah.
cute and delicate. They're fun. It's fun food.
Well, I got to tell you, this is just because I love these analogies. So, we're growing the radish microgreen and the broccoli microgreen with our
Oh, so
customers right
good.
now. Every month we send them those. We change it up, but right now it's broccoli and radish. And I learned that in one handful of broccoli microgreens, just a handful, it equals 5 florets of broccoli. So you can imagine the big broccoli floret, or even
Exactly.
not even a floret, the bulb, I guess. All 5 of those, same nutrient density in one little handful. That
Correct.
says it all.
And that's
Right?
why they
Right.
living food.
Exactly, exactly. And it's broccoli greens are very delicate. So you can very easily kind of put them in a sandwich or something, and they don't take over. You're right. They don't really take over. They're very
Yeah.
delicate. They almost kind of disappear in the sandwich.
They- They're very delicate, and you don't feel like you're chomping on a whole bunch of greens, but yet
Exactly.
you're getting nutrition. So
Exactly. Exactly.
yeah.
That is a great thing to end it on. The
Yeah,
mic
and even you put it, let's say, you even take, this is really going out there, but take a hot dog bun. So let's say you get an Ezekiel hot dog bun, okay,
Okay.
and whatever, and you want to put, and let's say you make some homemade chili,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
That's thick, not really thick, thick. And you put your greens, your microgreens in the bottom, and throw your chili on top. And it's like a sloppy Joe. Take the Ezekiel bun, put
Yeah.
your microgreens on that with the chili and some cheese for the kid, and you've got a beautiful meal.
Oh, that's perfect. That's perfect. And then they actually have no idea because the chili is so overpowering.
Exactly.
I love it. And then what really happens, which is so great, and people don't believe when I say this, is they actually do start to like the taste of it because they get used to it, when you start introducing it that way.
And a
So,
visual thing, because they're so delicate and cute and pretty. It's aesthetically pleasing to the eye, and we do eat with our eyes just as much as we eat
yeah.
with the rest of our senses. But those little microgreens are so cute to work with. They really are.
Right, right. That's so true. So true. Ah, wonderful. Well, this was great. I always love talking to you. And it's funny because I do, I walk away with all these different ideas. And my kids are like, "Are you talking to Robin again?" I love it. Thank you so much, Robin. I appreciate it.
Oh,
And we will be back at it next month, right? As always.
absolutely.
Okay, so we've now finished our second video series for the spring training with Planted Places. This was, as you know, all about Get Nourished, and we covered a lot of information about seedlings and what makes a healthy seedling, and we talked about harvesting and the growth stages of seedlings and how you know when you need to start harvesting and when that final harvest comes. And then we talked about the wonderful topic of getting your greens into your diet and making that just part of how you cook and how you eat on a daily basis. Because of how we grow our food here when we're doing small containers and on verticals, you're just grazing, you're just picking leaves all the time. You want to get in the habit of coming by and just grabbing 2, 3, 4 leaves and throwing that in a wrap that you make, throwing that in your scrambled eggs on the weekends. However you do it, you want it to really kind of change your behavior and your habits about how you think about eating. It really truly does change the way you think about cooking. Leafy greens and lettuces, they're way more than just for salads. So remember that, and I hope that was a big takeaway that you got from Robin when we had that interview. And then also the importance of nutrient density in your leafy greens and understanding that when you're buying, it's so sad because you think that you're doing the right thing, right? You're going and you're buying your organic greens at the grocery store. You're paying a lot of money for it. And what you don't realize is that it's taken lots of time getting to you. And then it sits in your refrigerator. So by the time you're actually eating it, it probably has anywhere from 15 to 77% nutrient depletion out of that. Spinach, crazy that spinach loses 90% of its vitamin C within 24 hours. All of these were studies that were done by UC Santa Cruz in their ag department. They did a big comprehensive study about nutrient depletion in organic vegetables. So super important to know about, and I'm just glad I was able to share that with you. So the next and last series is all about getting grounded, and we're going to cover the pest management, and we're also going to cover what it means to have healthy habits. And I'm going to be talking to Liz Campbell, and she's our yoga extraordinaire, and she's going to talk to you about what that means in terms of gardening and just groundedness. So very good, guys. See you the next time, and appreciate you guys joining us. Please share your thoughts. What was your biggest takeaway from this learning? What's something new that you did not know before? Love to know that we're creating new gardeners out there and new food gardeners at that. So we will see you in the next training. Thanks, everybody.